What's going on, everyone? Sports back with another video. In this video, I'm going to be doing a Toronto Blue Jays video, and I'm going to be talking about what the Blue Jays should do after the lockout. And right now, the MLB has just been a disaster. Of course, the lockout, doesn't allow any players to reach agreements on deals or sign deals with any MLB team. So, essentially, players just remain in free agency till this mess is all over. But the Jays have made some significant moves in the offseason. They lost a couple of their, two of their arguably their best players from last year. But they also signed a really good pitcher in Kevin Gausman. So at the end of the day, the Jays have had a decent offseason. I'm not going to sit here and say it's, really good. And at the same time, I'm not going to sit here and say, the Jays are going backwards. They're a young team that needs to save money, obviously, to be able to sign guys like Bo Bichette, Vladimir Guerrero Jr., Lourdes Gurriel, Teoscar Hernandez, Alek Manoah. All these guys are going to need to, they're going to demand big contracts when, their time comes. So the Blue Jays are really looking ahead to the future. And they're a team that, realistically, thinking about it, they're going to be really good for a long time. And as a ball club, that's what you hope. And hopefully the Blue Jays are able to build a winning club, but I think they are on the right track of doing that. But who are some players and what positions mainly should the Blue Jays attack once free agency gets, kicked back in? And I think the biggest need right now is the bullpen. They need relievers, and who are guys that could do that? I mean, there's not a ton of sexy names. So the Blue Jays are definitely, that's one of the areas that they're going to have to absolutely attack. They're going to need relief pitchers. The Jays, that was one of the main reasons that, they lost some games last year. The bullpen was very up and down last year. They had really good games and they had some really bad games. And with the Blue Jays, there's no shortage of runs. I mean, they have one of the best offenses in the whole MLB. So the question for the Jays, and it's not the starting pitching either, because it's slowly, quietly become one of the best starting rotations in the Major League Baseball. So the Blue Jays need to improve the relief pitching. That's the first thing. The second thing for me, they need to figure out what's going on with third base / second base. Of course, they lost Marcus Semien in the offseason, who played second base last year. He, of course, was the finalist for the MVP, so it's huge when you lose a guy like that. But now you need to figure out what's going on. You're going to be getting Kevin Biggio back, and he's a guy who could play third base and second base, so he's good to play either of those. He's a very flexible player, which is very nice to have. But looking at some names that could play the position that Kevin Biggio ultimately does not end up playing, you're looking at guys like Trevor Story, potentially, or a Chris Bryant. I mean, I think those are the two that come to mind in terms of big name guys in the free agent market. And then if you look bigger into a guy that the Blue Jays have really been rumored in on for a long time, that's third baseman of the Cleveland Guardians, Jose Ramirez. He is a guy you would have to trade for, but he's a stud. I mean, he would change the whole complexion of your ball club. And those three guys, of course, Story is a shortstop that would ultimately probably play second base. Maybe he can even play third. He's a pretty flexible guy as well. Chris Bryant would play third base, and same goes for Jose Ramirez. And then, of course, Kevin Biggio. It's great to have a player like him. Hopefully he's able to stay healthy, because he can do a lot. He can play left field if you need him to. He could play second if you need him to. He could play first base. He could play third base. He could do just about anything for you in the field, which is, as much as you can ask for a player, which is very good to have. But if, the Jays were to sign Bryant or Story, those would be guys that you have to pay for. So are the Blue Jays very interested in doing that? I think they're definitely a team that's going to spend money, but I don't think they're really going to want to go way out of their budget to get one of these guys. But at the same time, the market for them might be falling right now. So maybe, they get them for more affordable prices on a 5-year deal or something like that. But for Jose Ramirez, he, you would have to trade for him, which is very interesting because, what do you want to, what would you give up? And the Jays gave up to get Jose Barrios 2 very good prospects. So their prospect pool is still loaded. and they have got, realistically, a lot of these prospects are in positions that they have found the franchise for that position of, like Vladdy Guerrero Jr. You're not going to need a first baseman ever again. You'd probably not ever again, but for the next 10 years or so. Same goes for Bo Bichette over at shortstop, and we have a ton of shortstop prospects. Starting pitcher, I mean, you have the long-term answer there for a while. The only, main prospects that you wouldn't want to touch is, of course, the guys that could be in the bullpen, like the rotation, the relief pitchers. They have guys like Nate Pearson still, who's really young. And then the catcher spot is an interesting one. I think if you're trading for Jose Ramirez, I think a catcher could be included in that deal because you have Gabe Moreno down there who looks like he's going to be the next Sal Perez, maybe even better. That kid is a stud. But the Blue Jays have 3 guys that are capable of being an everyday catcher in the meantime before Gabe Moreno gets there. In the end, I think the Blue Jays go into the season ultimately with at least 2 of these catchers between McGuire, Jansen, and Kirk. And then they kind of reevaluate everything. And, ultimately once Moreno gets a call up, like by opening day 2023, I expect Moreno to be in the, opening day roster as well as one of these 3 catchers. So you have a little bit of flexibility there where you could trade. If it takes Alejandro Kirk plus something to get a guy like Jose Ramirez, I think the Jays really have to think about it. And the ultimate thing, like the biggest thing for the Blue Jays is not touching what you have here, what you've built. Like a guy like Lourdes Gurriel, Kevin Biggio, like those are important players for the team that if it takes those guys to bring in a Jose Ramirez, you're better off just going to spend a little bit more money and going to the free agent pool and bring in one of those big name players that's not going to cost you a guy off the roster. Now, if they're looking for a guy like Alejandro Kirk and Jordan Groshans for Jose Ramirez, then you definitely have to think about it, and ultimately I would do something like that because doing that, Ramirez is still super young, and that just solidifies your infield big time. And looking right now at what the Blue Jays have in terms of, their starting lineup offensively, you got Springer out in center. You got Gurriel in left. You got Teoscar Hernandez in right field. First base, you got Vladdy. Catcher, you could go with any of those 3 guys, Kirk, Jansen, or McGuire. Second base, you would have Kevin Biggio there. Short, you'd have Bo Bichette. And third base, you'd probably have Santiago Espinal. And then at the DH spot, you could go with Randall Grichuk. So there's a couple of potential guys that could go there. The other catcher that's not playing. So the Jays definitely have a lot of pieces, but adding an extra guy would be that much more important. I think Randall Grichuk is definitely a guy that by the time opening day comes in a couple of months from now, he may not be on the opening day roster. I would not be surprised if Randall Grichuk is moved. I know the Jays and Brewers, talked about swapping Jackie Bradley Jr. for Randall Grichuk, but for the Blue Jays, how does that benefit us? I don't really know. You have your outfield, set in stone pretty much with Gurriel, Springer, and Hernandez. So I think the Jays should hold on to Grichuk and, add him into a deal for a guy like a Jose Ramirez or for a, really good relief pitcher or a really good, 5th pitcher. So there's lots of things the Blue Jays could do there. But I think they're definitely really looking good as a whole team. But the final thing I think they should address is the number 5 spot in the rotation. And you could look at bigger name guys, but ultimately I think the Jays would go with a little bit of a cheaper option. You could, of course, go out and say that the Jays should go for a guy like Carlos Rodon, but he's going to cost you a pretty penny. But looking, and same goes for Clayton Kershaw. I just don't think that that's realistic for the Jays, being that they have to add someone in the infield. But more, notable guys I think they could sign. A guy like Chris Archer, a guy like potentially a Matt Boyd. I know they were rumored to, be interested in a trade with the Miami Marlins for potential, pitchers there. But looking in the free agent pool, there's just a ton of names they could go after that are going to cost you not too much money and be decent 5th rotation options. But at the same time, they have Nate Pearson, very, very capable player of pitching in the 5 spot. And then you could look at older name guys, potentially like a Jay Happ for a 1-year commitment. Maybe they try and go with Julio Teheran. He's a guy who, he's looking to kind of revive his career. Maybe you can get him on a one-year deal. He had a very, very promising, years back with the Atlanta Braves, pretty much at the beginning of his career. He was, in my opinion, he was a pretty lights-out pitcher. He, did a lot of good things for them. At one point, he had a 2.89 ERA, so he was definitely a good pitcher over there. So he's definitely a guy maybe you can take a shot at having him. He's got a career 79 and 77 record with a 3.81 ERA. So he's a potential guy you could go after. There's just so many names for that fifth rotation spot. But at the end of the day, if the Blue Jays do not choose to do that, there are some options there. You could go with a Ross Stripling. You could go with a Nate Pearson. There's just so many guys that the Blue Jays can choose to go with if they stay away from the fifth rotation, guy. But ultimately, I think the Blue Jays definitely stay interested in that. And there are a couple of areas on this ball club that they can improve. And the question is, will they, which ones will they attack? It's definitely going to be interesting. I think the Jays are really set up for a nice future. But that's all I got in this video, guys. You guys, let me know down below in the comment section what you think about all these names I talked about in the video. What area of the Toronto Blue Jays do they need to address most? To me, it's the relief pitchers, and if they could do that, then they're really set, and they look like World Series contenders. But it's definitely going to be an interesting offseason once it gets started again. That's all I got in this video, guys. You guys, please let me know all that good stuff down below in the comment section. And as always, please leave a like on the video. Subscribe to the channel if you guys are new. We'll see you guys on the next video. Let's go Blue Jays.